Go ahead and get started. Just so everybody knows, we are in the WBL Institute February Readiness to Launch session, part one. And I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Larry Williams, to open us up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the WBL Institute. As Takia mentioned, on a few of the pages that we have here, if you guys have a cell phone, I didn't get a chance to test it. So if you can just take your cell phone and just scan the screenshot of the QR code real quick, it should take you to our exit survey page. If someone can tell me if it's working. All right, I know it's working, Jared. I can see you with your phone. I actually know it's working. I just want you guys to fill out the exit survey at the end. So I just want to make sure that you guys know we have our exit survey and we want you guys to fill that out at the end. So you have a phone, you can use the QR code.
That was smooth, Larry.
um, Presenting today, myself, along with Mr. Jasmine Jardin, Joe Pinto, and Ms. Takia Weeks. Once again, the Q code on the bottom right of the page. I'll leave it there so you can scan it. So, some meeting norms for today. We all participate to make the session most useful for everyone. We commit to being present during the session and during the breakouts. And we encourage you to speak up live and to engage in the chat. And once again, you will complete the exit survey before you leave. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, with summer approaching fast, we want to make sure that you guys stay ahead of the game. So this session will support the planning of summer programming that will identify characteristics of the ideal student for each WBL experience and highlight the critical elements of the WBL opportunities to come. So we just introduced ourselves and our meeting norms. We're going to review the CTE Summer 2002 WBL programs, go over a couple acronyms, what programs do the acronyms stand for: ISP, CRSYEP, SEP, and ISP SYEP. So it's a mouthful. What are the three initial steps to readiness? And then we're going to go into discussion, unpack documentation, strategies for student selection, shoring up collaborative relationships, announcements and final thoughts, and sharing of resources. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Takia.
The program with videos. Yeah, the whole that counts. Yeah.
Thank you, Larry. So as was mentioned, we are starting to gear up earlier, thank goodness, this year for summer WBL. We know how things went last year. We definitely don't need to do a recap. I know many of you kind of did that slog with us last July and August. There was so much going on. There was so much that we had to roll out in a short space of time. And I know it gave most of us whiplash. So, in the reflection and thinking about how we can better plan and serve you guys, we certainly feel like starting now is going to be helpful. And we want to make sure that you are starting to put the structures in place to be successful. We know young people, and we are definitely hopeful that they will be taking advantage of these opportunities. But sometimes it's really about making sure that everyone is in the know as early as possible so that we can plan for what is coming. So if we move to the next slide, you can see all of the programs that we mentioned earlier side by side. So for those that maybe are new or haven't had the opportunity to participate, I'm just going to go through a little bit of the details of all four of these so you guys are aware of what's coming. So the first one is going to be Career Ready SYEP. This one is originally open to CTE schools and really allows for students to participate in summer youth employment in a more industry specific way. So as you may be familiar with the original SYP, it's a lottery system and students have a chance to apply and then potentially get selected through their CBO or the contracted agency that's in their specific borough and zip code. With Career Ready, a lottery is not necessary because the schools are opting in and much of the work takes place on the school level. And so we have the support of work-based learning coordinators and CTE staff, alongside the CBOs who still are participating in the placement and the host side of things. And DYCD is still the funder of the program, but the difference is that, again, it is pathway specific, and it's at the school building, especially for the younger youth who are doing a lot of the activity at the school. So this particular program is actually right now in the throes of being planned. We have DYCD on board, and the application process is actually going to be opening up next week. So we're wanting for you guys to keep your ear to the ground because more information is going to be coming. But the target for this had been about 800 students. We're hearing now that that is actually going to be doubling this year. We're doing more schools. And so the hope is that we'll be able to really kind of scale up in a way that is advantageous, not just to you guys, but to be able to bring on more students. So once again, the age group is 14 to 21. And this is going to run from July through to mid-August. And the pay is going to be minimum wage. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail, but that is kind of the baseline of what you would need to know if you haven't already heard about Career Ready. Then we move over to ISP SYEP, which is under Career Ready SYEP. And this one is our kind of CTE specific brand of SYEP. This one is more so centered on workplace challenge within the summer. So it is still SYP related in that it's targeting the same type of student, but it is, again, school specific, and it's really more a stipend-based program as opposed to a wage-based program. So students will be participating. There will be a challenge of sorts that they would be participating in. And at the end of it, they would be getting a lump sum payment as opposed to be getting a weekly wage. And then Industry Scholars, which is centrally developed. It's our CTE kind of, if you want to call it our flagship program. It's the one that we actually partner with our intermediary grant associates. And it is typically a 500 or so student target. We want to be really kind of focusing on rising seniors and making sure that they are leaving with the 54 hours potentially, if possible. Again, it's running around the same time frame. All of these are running pretty much around the same time. And this is also wage-based. And it's giving our students an opportunity to not only be placed in an internship, but to get some additional technical and soft skills. And so once we get to this program, we can talk a little bit more about this because we have a spring version that's coming up very soon, as well as a summer version. And then finally, Summer Enrichment, which was newly formed last year. It was definitely a whirlwind. At the time, we targeted about 25 to 30 schools. We certainly will want to do this program again. It may not be called Summer Enrichment. With the new administration, we know that the chancellor is probably going to brand it something else. But we certainly want to make sure that we're still providing the same opportunity, which is the ability for students to come in, get some remedial work done that they missed out on over the year, and then also tie that together with work-based learning to enable them to receive the stipend. So we are going to be doing this one again, and it will be probably changing slightly, but for the most part, the foundation will be the same. I see that we have a hand up. I don't know how burning this question is, but since it's you, Jared, I'll stop and let you ask the question.
Hey, everyone. Sorry to get, just to jump in real quick. For the two SYEP programs, is the DOE serving as the provider, or do we have to work with a CBO as the provider to run these programs?
Good question. So specifically for Career Ready, we are not the provider. DYCD is, so you would still be working through a contracted agency, and your school would have to pair with either the agency that you worked with last year. We are still hearing about whether or not, RFPs are going out and whether or not there'll be different partnerships, but for the most part, it would be the same partner you worked with. And Desmond, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk through ISP, SYP a little bit.
Yeah, that's quite fine. So to Kia's point, Career Ready SYP again is closer to the standard SYEP model, in that we're just referring the students to the current community providers. The ISP SYEP model is really a bridge in terms of us providing ISP modeling in the SYEP frame, meaning that we're going to actually, maintain, much like last year, we would ask for teachers, at each school, or basically a teacher of record to operate the program. So it's not going to be a handoff. It's just basically, I don't want to say we're spending their money, but essentially we're running the program through them, but we're actually running the program. We are the provider of note.
Thank you, Desmond. So we're going to get more into these, but wanted to just make sure you guys had a quick overview of what we will be focusing on. And we want to provide support as the WBL team, specifically on these programs, because these are the largest in terms of volume. And we know that for the most part, most, if not all of your schools are going to be doing one or more of these. So just making sure that you guys have a handle on this, and knowing that there's going to be multiple moving parts with different providers, and just different information coming at you. We want you to be able to keep all of that straight, but also feel like you're prepared with everything else that you have going on during the year. So moving to the next slide, we are hoping that we can start guiding you through those first steps. And so next slide, we will start with preparing you for the documentation collection that you are going to have to do. This is probably the biggest beast that most of you will have to contend with over the summer. We know that there are so many different types of document collection. And, obviously each school has its own system. We know CTS is a part of this, but for the most part, in terms of anything that DYCD is hosting, YEPS is the system that they're using. And YEPS is actually related to CTS in that it's the same parent company. And so a lot of the system looks the same. However, there is a little bit of double entry that may be happening, because we want to make sure that not only is the student being entered in YEPS, which is done usually by the provider, so not something you have to do, but you would end up having to do on the back end once the program begins to wrap, your own kind of recording of the WBL hours that student was able to do over the summer. So in thinking about what documents need to be collected, some of it is going to be the I-9 documentation, making sure that students have, all of the things they need, ID, with a picture, having something with their address on it, proof of age, all of those things. We want to make sure that you have a system so that none of that gets lost, but also that you have a better sense of who's eligible, because some students cannot produce all of these documents. And so that might be another way that you could start to parse out which student would be right for which opportunity. Sadly, we don't have enough opportunities that are geared up and can actually include undocumented students. And that's hopefully something we'll continue to work on. But for the most part, all of the wage-based programs are going to need a social security number or some type of TIN. And so for those that are stipend-based, you have a little bit more leeway around the documents that you need to collect. So in terms of how this should look, we really want you to start early in not just recruitment, but starting to think about document collection and where you're going to start to house these. Do you have a Google Doc? Do you have the Vault? I know that's a software that is really good in terms of being able to house sensitive information. I don't know what your systems are, but we want to make sure that you have something, and that if you need to have support in that area, that we can start to support you now with suggestions, recommendations, what have you. And so moving to the next bullet, figuring out your selection process. So harkening back to what I said, obviously you want to start with the recruitment and the documentation, and then thinking about, well, which students can I tap for each of these opportunities? Some students, are definitely going to go for a wage-based program. They want an internship, and they're at that stage in their career where they've done other things that are building up to that. So they may not necessarily be who you'd want to target for a stipend-based program. However, there might be students who really have a lot to do when it comes to academic recovery. And so those students, because they'll have to juggle a schedule where they're doing things during the class time of the summer, may need to do a stipend-based program to be able to supplement and still complete what they need to do during the day. So those are some of the things you might want to think about. what kind of WBL does each student need? How many hours do they still need? That also might be a dictator as to how you decide to place students. And then of course, student choice. We don't want to put a student in something that we know they're not interested in. Hopefully they've expressed to you which one they would like. And as you guys all know, students hedge their bets as well. They will apply to every and anything and then see which one comes back fastest, or see which one pays the most, or see which one works best for them and make a decision that way. So I think that's a piece that we also have to factor in, is that sometimes best laid plans don't always work out because the student choice is a part of this decision. And so moving to the next bullet, we want to make sure that you're keeping in mind that, this is obviously a process that you're not going to do by yourself. We have a lot of collaboration and partnerships as part of this. And we want to make sure that in terms of who is on your side, you are counting parents and teachers and school staff and us, and of course, CBOs and providers to really play a role in making sure that this actually is a seamless process. So I think there's a step for everybody, every stakeholder, but it really is up to you to be able to tap all of these individuals for what they can support you with, and not wait till the last minute, because nothing is worse than hearing a no. But if you had asked me earlier, that definitely is not something that we want you guys to hear. So we're hoping that, you can start to put, what needs to be put down in terms of a foundation so that everybody feels like they have enough time and space to get involved. And so I will move to the next slide. And I think I'm passing this over to Desmond Jardine to take us through the document piece.
Thank you so much, Takia. As mentioned earlier, the key piece to most of this work is the document collection. That generally tends to be the biggest pinch point for most of the work that we do, because it's where we actually are asking the students to kind of delve into their actual life and collect stuff that their parents generally don't want them to walk around with. Can we go to the next slide, please? When we think about what documents we will need for programming, Takia also made a great point. It's a sliding scale in terms of, we can go to the next slide. What we know is that, for example, the DYCD application, anything having to do with summer youth, requires the most information that we will have to collect in this process. So to that point, if you aim for a DYCD, it's kind of like shooting for the moon, and if you miss, you hit the stars. In terms of, as we stated before, what types of information is required, knowing especially the DYCD part, is proof of age, proof of citizenship, proof of address, photo ID, parent financials, big one. And we have a couple of just best practices around parent financials as well, but also transcript and or report card. Again, recommend both, as well as student working papers, as well as most students who are not doing a stipended program all students who are not doing a stipended program will need to complete the I-9 process. A couple key things to remember is that some documents do double duty. So for example, a birth certificate counts as both proof of age and proof of citizenship, right? A photo ID may have, multiple proofs as well, in terms of being proof of age as well as proof of address, depending on the document. So, when we see this and we see this long list of proofs that we need to have for the students, again, our recommendation is start early, but also, when you think about your document collection system, to the point, do you have a scanner? Do you have a way to get it, collect it, and know that you have it, so that you can also track what you got from whom, when, so that we can turnkey it depending on who needs to get it. So for example, with the ISP programs, knowing that needs to get passed off to a provider and make it into the YEP system. How are you storing these files electronically or in paper version, so that can be transitioned over to someone else, versus the stuff that we're going to need to the ISP that you're going to have to upload or pass off to SIMS or be able to put into the CTS program yourself. If you have a scanner, we recommend it. If you can, access or purchase like a handheld scanner or a personal scanner, again, not knowing what budgets look like, but that also would facilitate having the scanner near you at all times when students do have their key documents, right? Because again, we also know just from, life examples, students may bring the documents today, forget to meet you, and then tomorrow when they remember, everything's back at home and mom put it back up, and so it becomes a complication. Can we get to the next slide, please? Again, when we think about, next slide, please, when we think about the ways that we collect and passing it on, we really also want to be very clear about who's going to be collecting the information, who's a reliable source for collecting it, tracking it, keeping it, right? And this can be a shared responsibility, but it's just, again, about clearly delineating whose responsibility it is, right? So the first question is, is it going to be the work site or the CBO who can help with this? Oftentimes, if you have a CBO that's connected to your school, they will be collecting some of this information. But, again, going back to your own school records, looking at, what admin has within the building, some of this you may already have. But then also, if you're collecting it, it's really about collecting things in a way that can be stored electronically or just in a very clear, organized manner, right? Simplification is key. Parent contact. We know that so many times in this process, especially when we're talking about the DYCD document collection, parent contact is deep, right? We need parent financial information. We need, billing information. We may need copy of tax information. Parents are not always going to be very forthcoming with this information at the front end. One of the recommendations that I have with this is actually print out the DYCD paper application, send that back with the student, and just tell the parents, listen, we need you to complete this, not to send it into DYCD expressly, but so we can do it online. But this way they also see the application, see the paper requirements, see that they have to give certain financials, and it leans into the conversation so that they know that this is a trusted, that this material is going to a trusted source and that it's being kept. And again, in terms of tracking and working with the CBOs, who's responsible for it? How do you want to document it? We did come up with a mock-up. Larry, if you could please just click on the Google form. Now, again, this is not something that we're mandating anybody use, but this is a sample that we came up with. So what we have here, for example, is a sample Google survey document, right? Now, in my mind, you take this, something like this, you distribute it to your students. They can go through the survey and literally click on what document type they have, right? What do you have for proof of identity? Do you have your student ID card? Do you have your driver's license? Do you have your New York City ID? They click on it. The next question is to actually upload a picture of the file. What happens there, as you see, as we scroll down, more questions. What do you have as proof of age? Then give me a copy of it. What do you have as your social security card? Give me a copy of it. What do you have as your utility bill? Give me a copy of it. So what would happen here is now that as the students complete this form and they hit send and submit, at the tail end of it, what you'll have is a survey document that has the student pertinent information, what documents they've listed, and a copy of the documents hyperlinked. Now, again, at this point, we can't, we're not going to prescribe necessarily this form of document, but the idea is to make sure that you have something that works for you in terms of retention and in terms of having everything in a really clear and easily transmittable manner, right? Because the other part is that you need to be able to pass this information off to either another provider or to SIMS, or to be able to upload it into CTS yourself. So for us, that becomes the key thing. But with that, we would like to transition back to the actual student selection process, and I'll be handing out to my colleague, Larry. Larry?
Thank you. Thank you, Desmond. Student selection process. Love talking about students and would love to have a discussion with you guys about it because you guys are the gatekeepers of all of their information. But before we actually jump into the discussion itself, this whole presentation actually prompted some stuff for me because I actually thought about my internship experience in high school, and then I started to ask my wife about her internship experience in high school. We both went to public high schools in Brooklyn, and what I noticed out of both of them is that we went through two different processes, right? I was explaining to her that I didn't really have a process. I was in a class, and I think the way my teacher presented it to me was, hey, he presented it as part of the curriculum. It was a part of the class that I had to take it. But what I noticed was not all the students in my school had one. My friends didn't have, a lot of my friends didn't have an internship. I'm using internship as an example. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually wondered why I got one and other people didn't. And I mean, if you're asking me like 20 some years later, I'm probably gonna say it was maybe because I was the good kid, right? But still, that's an assumption that I'm making because I wasn't a teacher, I was a student at the time. So I would like to hear from you. But then I was asking my wife, and she went to Brooklyn Tech, and I said, well, and I know she had an internship, and I said, well, how did you get your internship? She said, she had friends in the school who had an internship, and they suggested to her that she reached out to the guidance counselor and asked for an internship as well, which was kind of interesting because for me, it's why were some kids offered an internship and others not offered an internship. And she's she's a goody two shoes. So I wouldn't understand why she wouldn't get presented with that opportunity. So being as though you guys are in the school and you're working with students, it prompted us to come up with these questions on how can your student selection process balance adult nomination with student choice? What are some best practices in adult nomination of students for work-based learning? And what are some best practices in student choice of their own work-based learning? And you can choose to answer one of three, two of three, or all three of them if you wish. But the point is for us to have dialogue on what that student selection process looks like. I shared with you mine from the other side of the coin, but being as though you guys are the ones that work with students, very eager to find out what the selection process is like for you guys. And it's probably the same for all schools, maybe not, but it'd be very interesting to hear what your selection process is like. So please feel free to unmute yourselves. Don't be shy and share with us some of your processes.
I'll jump in and share what we do. Hey everybody, we've been doing SYEP for a long time, and it's a great program for the kids. As Desmond was sharing, the paperwork is really the first part. So anybody that is not on the paperwork side of things is like, nope, sorry, you don't got it together. We're not sending you out there. For SYEP, we do work with a provider that allows us to have a variety of internships. So we tell the kids, they're open to you. We keep a couple of our closest partners a little closer to the chest. And for those, we look to the teachers for teacher recommendations and really try to see if the kids are performing at a level that we think is going to make us look good, because we want to keep those going. So if we got a kid who's lazy and just isn't with it, is not going to be a go-getter, then we're not going to give them the best of the best internship opportunities with the best company. But we try and be fair to everybody. If they do what they got to do and they're timely with what they do, as long as it's something that they show an interest in, we'll try and open it up. For the ones that are the lottery based, that's first come, first serve based on the lottery, so that's what it is. But the ones that we do where it's sector based, where we can really focus on certain fields, usually the teacher is probably the first step of where we would ask and see how they're doing in class and if they're taking care of business with what they need. And if they have the skills that match what the job is, really.
Thanks for sharing, Jared. I think you kind of answered it, but there are two things that I wanted to ask you, right? Number one, you mentioned documentation. Is the documentation given to all students? But I think you mentioned that it is, right?
So we do we usually do a push into the classrooms, into the technology, the CTE classes, and we just go through, basically what pretty much what Desmond did. These are your options. This is what you got. We used to do something like what you were showing where we collected it all electronically, but then it was it was in too many different locations because SYEP wanted their own stuff. Sometimes they wanted paper, and then we had it electronics, and then we're printing out everybody's stuff. But yeah, so we go through what all the documentation is. Sometimes we'll do when it used to be hard copy stuff, we would have big days where it'd be document collection day, and we put them in the auditorium, and it's row 1, come up, what you got? Check, 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 next. So that's kind of how we would do it at a bigger scale. But I put in the chat, we actually heard from our provider today that I guess they liked what they did last year with SYEP, doing it all electronically. And I think they're doing that all again for paperwork stuff. So that might shift, how we go about actually, checking and verifying that they have the right stuff, because it'll be more through that system. But when it was in-person stuff, we would definitely spend time and just make sure they had the right stuff and tell them, you know, especially I think you mentioned like the TIN number and the Social Security. We got kids at our school that, you know, they came in as immigrants and their families don't have that. And then they're like, why can't I get a job? And we're like, sorry, like, I'm not going to blow up your spot or anything, but we can't do it. That's what the city wants. So we try and talk them through it as best we can.
Thank you, Jared. Anyone else want to share what their student selection process looks like?
I'd like to share. Hi, this is Rachel Monaco from Susan Wagner High School. We did the summer enrichment program last summer with Virtual Enterprises. And I have to tell you, it was incredibly successful. The students got an opportunity to actually have their business partners in the Zoom calls. And whereas, you know, a lot of business people just did not have the availability to physically, you know, come to a classroom, now they were showing up in these Zoom calls and working with the kids. And it was just so incredibly successful. And I actually have a meeting Monday because I did reach out to the folks at VE, and you know, I actually made the recommendation to you know, to move forward with this this program this summer. You know, I have a lot of kids that are on the cusp of their hours, and the fact that they were able to do the work-based challenges through VE, it was just incredibly successful. But more importantly, the kids got to network with people from Deloitte and other companies, and you know, and to this day they're still telling me how they keep in touch with them, and I'm like, that's what you do. You keep in touch with them and you keep asking them, you know, any internships, any this, any that, and they direct the students to look at the company's website. So you know, and they had a great time, and they all showed up. Even on Zoom, they all showed up.
Nice.
So I hope that my meeting on Monday with the folks at VE is successful, because I am definitely pushing for this again. So thank you.
Well, I mean, it sounds like what you just shared was very successful. So, I mean, as long as you're sharing those with your industry partners, the same way you shared it with us, I'm pretty sure it will be successful. Emily, I think you have your hand up.
Yes. Hi. I was going to share a little bit also that we do. I think a little bit of overlaps with some of the things that Jared said, where he talked about certain partners at different levels of involvement. So one of the things that we did, even way before everything was folded into SYEP, was that we've always done these big like interview days. Where students would apply, like, you know, back when it was all through me, through whatever we called SIF before it was SIF. I don't even remember at this point, but it would be like, you know, here's our, you know, 30 summer internships with our different partners and whatever. And the students would be like, well, these are the 5 I'm interested in. And the partners would say how many, you know, which ones they want to interview. We'd have this big breakfast. Everybody would come, they'd get all dressed up. We're hoping to create a similar experience this year, obviously virtually, because we're not going to bring everybody into the building, but going through that whole process of like submitting their resumes and interviewing. And then I kind of played that like matching role to be like, well, who did the partner like and which one did the kids like? Because sometimes you always had 1 or 2 kids who had like 6 interviews. So I'd be like, you know, which were your favorites? Which were you like, you know, that's not for me. And so when everything sort of got absorbed into SYEP a few years ago, we continued doing that for those specific partners who have been doing that basically since 2010. And it's a great way to give the partners some extra buy-in to everything, because they're meeting the students. And it's a great experience for the students to actually go through the interview process. You know, it's like I say to them, like, you're not going to have one job interview. You're going to have dozens of job interviews over your life. So the more practice you get, the earlier you start, the better off it is. And then we always get feedback from the teachers and things too, for specific things and stuff like that.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Emily. Does anybody else want to share real quick?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'll share real quick. I like to play devil's advocate. I saw someone put that in the chat. And I always try to go after the student who thinks no one will ever offer them an opportunity, just so that you can tap into that hidden skill, you know, and it's sometimes it's just like you said before, like you were given an opportunity and your wife wasn't, and why? You know, and once a kid is denied by one person, they always think that the next person is going to deny them. So, you know, I always, because for the most part, the kids usually shy or they're insecure about their own skill set. So I just try to, even just going through the application process, and if they don't take the opportunity, but at least going through the whole process of applying for the job, going to orientation, you know, and most times when you meet a kid like that, it's usually the parent. Sorry to say it, the parent is the I'm gonna say problem, for lack of a better word, you know, behind the child's insecurities or the child not being able to submit the documentation on time because the parent don't want to share the document. So, you know, we run into a lot of that also. And I noticed, unfortunately, through COVID, you know, people start living in different locations. Some parents left the country. People who were living with grandparents were deceased. So we had a difficult time getting documents last year because of, you know, people relocating. So I'm glad that they're releasing the applications earlier so that we can start that process sooner. Last year, we were able to use, I think it's a letter from the school that would serve as proof of address for the kid, and my provider accepted, I forgot what it was called. Sorry. It's a school letter, verification with proof of registration. We were able to use like the schools, there's a letter that school was able to generate an ATS or something that satisfied the proof of address for a lot of our students. And they accepted it. So we had to, you know, go through some loopholes as to make it happen. So we were able to work with our providers to say, this is the address that we have on file. This is what the parents, you know, if it was something different, the parents, you know, have, and we were able to use that if we were unable to produce a bill, because some of our kids' parents work off the book. They don't have the income, you know, like that. Some of our students may live in a basement of someone else's home and unable to prove address with their name on it. So we utilize the schools. There's some letter, I'll find out the proper name of it. Maybe somebody else knows. We utilized the letter for proof of address. So that was very, that was productive and helped us to pull up our numbers.
But I think it's also, it speaks to something you mentioned earlier about offering for students who don't think that they're either worthy of an internship or that they can't get an internship. I think it speaks volumes to the work that you do with students to look past surface level, and there has to be something that you're seeing in this student that says that, you know what, maybe they don't see it yet, but I do. Let me give them this opportunity. So I think that's very important too. Thanks for sharing. Just want to go back to Desmond's. Desmond, I didn't forget you. He wants to play devil's advocate. How many have had experiences where a student surprised you because they stepped up since you gave them something to lose that they and others thought they didn't deserve? And that's for anyone.
Yeah, we've absolutely had that happen for sure. We definitely had some kids, you know, who weren't the best students, didn't necessarily always do the best, but when given the right opportunity, absolutely, you know, shined brighter than anyone expected. I mean, I think we hoped they would, and then we were very happily proven right. We've absolutely had that happen. I think it's about finding a teacher or someone at the staff who sees that glimmer. Like, I only teach seniors, so I don't see a lot of the younger kids. I really rely on the other teachers to help me out, but also finding the right partner, the right, you know, internship host or whatever, who's going to help, you know, cultivate that also. And you can't just put those kids in any situation. You really have to know your partners and who those mentors are really well, who are going to be able to do that. But we've absolutely had that happen without a doubt.
Thanks, Emily. Anyone else?
I think another thing too with the devil's advocate of what Desmond's question was, if a kid is not performing well necessarily academically, but they show initiative or like they care or they show like an interest, like that for me trumps everything. Like if you could tell that they're committed to it. So, you know, we get that a lot where, you know, they won't be the best like with their grades, or maybe they'll be good in one class and that's really what they want to do. So that's where they invest their time. and that's where we'll try and find them the spot, because we could tell like they actually care about that thing, So that for us is like, and especially like having worked with a lot of providers, number one thing they say why they don't want to work with the kids anymore, or like they weren't successful, is that they were just on their phones the whole time. So like if they want to do it and they care and they're not going to just be like trying to get a paycheck, then yeah, that's worth it.
Makes sense. Thanks, Jared. Anyone else want to share their process or answer the devil's advocate question? All right. Well, thank you for indulging in our group discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to Joe to talk about collaborative relationships.
Thank you, Larry. I see remarkably that we are running on schedule right now, which is great. I'm still going to try to move somewhat quickly through these next few slides, though, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I do sense that folks, we've already had some questions answered in the chat. I do sense that folks are going to have questions, so it would be nice to be able to leave some time at the end for those questions, but also some of the content of these slides has come up already in the course of conversations, which is great. You know, some of this will be review for folks. We are not, you know, as the folks who run the Institute, we're not always the experts in the room. Oftentimes we're providing the content, the information that you seek. Oftentimes we're just bringing it out where it's already here. So some of this has already been talked about. The reason we want to talk about collaborative relationships, I mean, we always talk about it here at the Institute, we're kind of a broken record. We really believe in partnerships and relationships. They're important at every time of year. They're especially important before the launch of a major initiative like this, when the time is right to really think about what the most important relationships are going to be, who you're going to be relying on the most, and then sending some love to the places where relationships either have not been started yet, or where relationships have maybe gone quiet or gone a little dormant, or those communication channels don't necessarily exist yet. So if we could have the next slide, please. You know, so talking some of the basics, you know, going into the recruitment season, relationships with teachers and school staff, before even, you know, the opportunities are announced, just gathering some info. You have your quantitative data in CTS, in any of your other systems, you have quantitative data about who has done what and how much and in what way. There's also the qualitative data, right? They're like, what do my colleagues know about what students have done, how they've done it, how they've responded to it, how it's been for them. Gather some of that initial sort of front end information and get your ear to the ground about what your colleagues are saying about what students need and who needs what. Make it possible for work-based learning opportunities to be announced in multiple areas of school life, right? This is a great way to build, and we've talked about some of this already, to build the investment of your colleagues is to give them opportunities to sort of be part of sharing the big news, sharing the big opportunities, as well as to become part of the collection of applications, the collection of information and documentation. If it's just this kind of narrow protected conduit of you communicating somehow sort of directly on your own with students and then with you, it kind of bypasses all these areas of school life where summer work-based learning opportunities could really organically become part of the flow of things. You know, and then as the opportunities are announced, create processes by which teachers and other staff can regularly discuss and recommend students, especially, you know, at the front end, but also additionally as the programs as the application process is up and running, as they get in new information about who's interested, who's eligible, who would be great, make sure that those lines of communication stay open. The next slides. Okay, so we have relationships with intermediaries and work sites as well. So it's important to establish good communication with the intermediaries that select your sites. This you already know. Introducing yourself to work sites, modeling the kind of communication that you want or expect, and asking for an update system that works for you, a feedback loop that works for you. Communication between the school, the student, and the site is kind of the crux of how well these programs roll out in the summer. So whatever you want that communication channel to be, think about it ahead of time and make sure that before summer is here, you've asked for the things you need. and you've put out the things that you're willing to provide in terms of communication to the people you'll be working with, and all of the sites in your purview. Next slide, please. So this, we just kind of wanted to tack this on and remind you, we talked a lot. We're always talking about parents. We're big believers here in parents as partners, as are all of you. At our last session, we talked a lot about parents as partners. So we didn't especially foreground them this time. But they are, we've talked about a big chunk of this conversation was about document collection. That is not possible, of course, without parents. But by the same token, parents aren't just for that, and parents themselves, we believe, aren't really necessarily going to respond super well when they're just being asked for things, and they're not being included more broadly in the conversation about what's going on with their student, what opportunities are available to them, why you think this or that program is a good idea for them. So a communication approach with the home that is more than just, hey, we need these documents now, is definitely going to be important. That is it for these slides. I'm going to turn it back over to, yeah, go ahead.
Just want to add, Joe, not only taking parents on as partners, but take them on as early partners.
Yeah.
No one loves being late to a party. Take them on. I mean, we're in February, and you don't want students coming last minute with forms and stuff like that, because parents make plans for their kids, as we get closer to May or June, and you don't want to be approached with a situation where, all right, well, the kids are not going to be here, or whatever the case may be. Take them on as early partners, share the information with them as early as this month so that you guys are on the same page about the expectations of that child. It's very, very important to do so.
And can I add, in terms of partnerships, we want to make sure that you guys are getting the support. So circling back to something as simple as, money, funding, we do have SIF funds still available. We even have the WBL SAM funding, and that hopefully is going to help you as you start to do this early planning. So we are your partners as well. We want to make sure that you can be compensated for any extra time that you're spending between now and June in this planning process. So please think about us as a partner. And if there are things that you guys need that's going to make this easier for you besides the WBL Institute workshops, that is what we want to advocate for. So like things like handheld scanners, we're already having a conversation about whether that's something that we might be able to provide large scale. Also things like document collection, repositories that are safer than Google. We know that that might be helpful, like what Desmond shared in the Google survey that he just showcased. That may be something you could start with, but that's not necessarily ideal when it comes to sensitive information. So we know that many of you guys you have the bones of this. Some of you do this very well. We want to hear from you so we can get those best practices out, but we also want to make sure that from Central, we're doing what helps you, not just spinning your wheels or not just telling you what we think you want to know, but also what you're asking. So if there are other questions that don't get surfaced today, please reach out with them so that, part 2 of this, which is coming in March, we can get those answered. But I'll turn it back over. I think, is it me next? I think I'm the last
I think you
one.
and Larry are bringing us home.
Yeah, so we're still doing coaching. This month, the coaching is going to be focused individually on each of these programs. So we're starting with Career Ready next week, Wednesday. We want to do a deep dive. Anybody who has questions, suggestions, thoughts, still have challenges in thinking about how this is going to roll out. Again, application is going to be launched on Monday. Come to the session on Wednesday so that we can help with ideation, with support. We really want to divide up the coaching so that it's by program, and you guys will have the space to be able to think this through. If there are things that you still need, bring staff who might be partnering with you, bring anybody you think could use the help or that needs to hear about this stuff early on. So that's coming. We also have the next Institute session, like I said, Ready to Launch Part 2, which is going to be a little bit more of a deeper dive into how this should look and thinking about ways that your students are going to be ready. And then finally, in terms of planning the support, we want to make sure that you guys are participating in all of this planning and making sure that you're hearing from the providers. So as I said, DYCD will be reaching out. You guys who have not already been contacted will be, and you'll be getting partnered with agencies as well. So please stay tuned for additional PD that's focused specifically on Career Ready, which is actually going to be bigger in terms of its volume this year. And then I will turn it over to any other questions before we close out. Do we want to, answer questions? Yes, please go ahead.
I just have a quick question, and I hope that it's included in the workshops. Will we need to create training plans for SYEP opportunities and document through attendance in order for the students to get accurate credit for?
Excellent question. Yes. So in terms of the information you're going to need from DYCD, you will need attendance information, and that's going to come from your CBO provider. So that's part of the relationship you need to build. You don't necessarily need to have the actual timesheet, but you would want to get a record from them at the end of the summer as to how many hours your kids did. It might be as simple as getting you a YEPS login so you can go in and pull those reports. But since we don't want you to get into the weeds of another database, we want you to be able to have that relationship so that you can get a printout of all of the hours so that that can go in and attach itself to the profile that the students have in CTS. In terms of the training plan, again, something very simple. We know it's not, we would love it to be automated to where you can put one training plan in and attach multiple kids. We're not there yet, but it is something we're advocating for in CTS. There's many changes that we know need to be made to CTS, and that's something that we're working with the SIMS team on. But barring that, we would hope that you can put something really small together, just could be the bare minimum, to let folks know that the SYEP program was what the students participated in. And we would probably give you guys at least a few weeks leeway after the summer to be able to get that sorted out, so you're not thinking about it now. But if you know a student has applied and gets accepted, you may be able to put that in early on in the summer, so it's one less thing you have to worry about. Then all you have to do is attach the hours. So yes and yes to both of those.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And
you're welcome.
Sorry, can you guys add on the task bar for work-based learners? On the the student
drop downs.
You know how the students have a tab to say task?
Yes.
Because sometimes I have to search to find like what do I need to do next? Which student actually signed?
Right.
We don't get any information back based on what the student actually completes unless you go in and search for that student. So something that may be like a little button that says, what tasks that I need as, if I'm signing in, because I have there's another work-based coordinator, and plus other CTE teachers are doing things. So I don't know if it's something that I've added or another coordinator. Or
I got you. So just kind of knowing what's missing too, so that you can kind of
right. And who's the author of that particular activity? Got it.
Thank you for that. Go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in really quick because I had a preliminary conversation with my CBO yesterday, and we actually already had set up a meeting for Friday to start talking about all of this even before this session. And I had mentioned to her the whole concept of like getting the info with the hours, whether it had, one of my questions was sort of like, does it have to be tracked real time over the summer, or can we do it all at the end like we did this year? Because in the fall, this past fall of 2021, it sort of sounded like we weren't going to be able to do that post like we did before, but maybe we are. But anyway, I had spoken to her about like getting access to their system, and she was like, she doesn't think DYCD is going to be okay with that. But she did say that they can pull reports really easily to give to me like they did for summer 2021.
Yeah.
So we're just going to figure out sort of what that has to look like.
Yeah, the report piece is definitely the way to go. Again, so you don't have to get in the weeds of learning another system, but also it makes sense to get the report at the end, because there's so much that happens in terms of adjustments in that last 2 weeks of the program that doing it early, you're going to have to correct yourself. So,
but like we would have until like the end of September or something to get it all up and in there. Yeah,
we're going to work with you guys because we know how much we're asking, especially with the 54 hours and the WBHR code. We know how much this is, so you will have that leeway for sure.
But also, sorry to jump in on that, Takia, but also to that point, we still would like, if they could provide a week by week breakdown, right? Like there may be adjustments, but when it comes down to it, like just having that total number and kind of retrofitting it, it was a kind of a one-time fix, but I think that's the place where like the legality comes into place, right? Because we're just assuming that the kid worked on this day because of hours. That's where we get ourselves into trouble. So requesting the week by week breakdown will probably be the good look, even if it's happens towards the end of the summer. But definitely preface those conversations with the providers early on so that they know that that's the expectation, so that come August they're not like, you didn't say that you needed this broken down this way, right? I think that's the general recommendation. But continue.
Yeah, no, one good way to do it is there's a midpoint evaluation that has to happen. Maybe also timing it around then, because the providers then are looking at where students are and, you know, how they perform for the first 3 weeks of the program. So, you know, that kind of timing I think makes sense. They're already running reports anyway. So jumping on that train rather than asking them every week might be helpful. So you get kind of the first section and then the last section, and you can kind of rectify anything that is a missing or a gap in that time. So that's one thought. I know we're out of time. I definitely don't want to keep people longer than we have to.
Takia, I'm sorry, before we do, I think there's a question in the chat from Mike that wasn't answered.
Let me just take a look. Thank you.
Is there a target date for starting the summer SEP process?
Thank you, Mike. So at this point in time, we're needing to just shore up the fact that we're going to even call it that. I know that the funds are available, but now we have to wait to kind of get senior leadership, so the chancellor and his crew, to decide what they want the summer rising to be called, and then once we kind of get that information, we can brand. So we can't really roll anything out until we know what this bigger umbrella is going to be under, unfortunately, and so probably closer to mid-March is when you'll know. But certainly we want to get you guys a jump start on that as well. We started last year in May. We definitely don't want to start that late. So once we get clear of the career ready piece, hopefully we'll be getting right into SEP in March. So hope that helps. And I think there's one other, just thank yous. So Larry, go ahead and take it away.
But thank you. Before we lose everyone, Takia, can you drop the exit survey link into the chat?
Yes, we'll do.
There's also a QR code on the screen, so hopefully you guys had your cell phones out where you can scan the QR code and fill out the survey even before you leave the building or head into your kitchen or your bedroom, whatever the case may be. But just fill it out, please. Really appreciate it. Our institute calendar is the first link. You'll get all of these resources at the end of the week. We also have a WBL Institute YouTube channel that has all of the videos that we've done within the past 18 months. So please, you can go there at your will. Please subscribe. A lot of valuable information there. And also we have the link to the session resource folder and of course the exit ticket, all of which will be shared with you by the end of the week.
Hey, I have a question. Do you have a minute? It's Lori Scheinberg. How are you guys? Can you hear me?
We're wanting to wrap it, Lori. Quick.
Yeah.
You answered my question about like the summer rising. I was just texting it, so thank you I couldn't think of what it was, so thank you for saying it.
You're welcome. Always good to have you, Lori. Go for it, Larry.
On behalf of myself, Takia, Joe, and Desmond, we thank you for attending. We look forward to seeing you next month. And if you need to contact us, all of our information is right here on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to us. Like Takia mentioned, we are here to support you. So have a good afternoon, everyone.